Hello everyone. So as y'all know, this term fraud, or quote unquote being a fraud, has reached new heights in the One Piece community. And these fraud allegations happen in almost every single chapter that has released as of recent. And as a few of you may know, my biggest video on my channel is going over only a few of these characters. Which, thanks for showing that video so much love, by the way. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we will be going over every single character I have been seen labeled as a fraud. I looked at Reddit, searched through tier lists, the abomination that is Twitter One Piece fans, and of course here on YouTube. And the results were pretty much the same as my original video. That being that most of these characters are questionable at best in terms of being frauds. But anyways, let's get into this video. This is the debunking of every single quote unquote fraud in One Piece. Hope y'all enjoy. So it's only right to start off with my favorite character in the show that isn't Luffy, of course, and that is Vince Smoke Sanji. So some of you may be asking, how is Sanji even considered a fraud by some people? Well, this discourse would begin in one of the more recent chapters when Luffy and Kizaru had just tied against each other. And we also saw that Saturn had entered the island and went to his spider form, a giant spider form, whatever y'all want to call it. So for most of us normal Sanji fans and fans of the series in general, we did not have that high of expectations for Sanji at this time, as Saturn is clearly like one of those guys who Sanji is just not on that level. Well, a certain group of individuals thought this would be the time for Sanji to box with a Gorosei or unlock Conqueror's Haki, and it just got so ridiculous to a point where this actually became a pretty decently agreed upon prediction of this happening. As we know, that did not happen. What we got was Saturn using some mind hack's ability to hurt Sanji, which I guess he was just somehow supposed to know according to some people. But yeah, this sparked a pretty massive overreaction as we see he did not take any major damage at all. As well as people tend to ignore the fact that he instantly ran in to try and save Bonnie, which sure was probably reckless on his behalf, but he would never go against his morals. I could also bring up he was also in base, but that's another topic for another day. I'm not here to ramble about this, I'm just here to turn down some accusations that are not true. We'll see what Oda has planned for him later on, as I'm sure he still has a part to play here. But other than that, I can safely say Sanji is not a fraud. Now, let's talk about Revolutionary Army member Sabo. Now, when we're talking about Sabo being a fraud, this mostly stems from the moments in which he was attempting to rescue Cobra from Imu and the 5 Gorosei. And I think what the problem is for Sabo is that maybe we put too much expectations on him in this moment. And I'm not going to say it wasn't justified at the time, as the only things we had for him was being praised by so many people as a super high up godlike figure. And is even said to have a greater influence than Monkey D. Dragon himself. As well as having an interesting fight against Green Bull and Fujitora, who, let's face it, were not going all out. Now let's get back to what happened. As we all know, it was pretty much a nightmare for Sabo in there. He really didn't do much of anything at all. I mean, he tried to use a flame attack, but it did 0 damage to anyone in there. And when he himself got attacked by one of the Gorosei, he got violated pretty badly, and if Cobra was not there to save him, we would have seen the end of Sabo. Now, in my first video, I said if there's anyone on this list that I could possibly see being a fraud, it would be Sabo. But that is before I knew how strong the Gorosei actually were. I got my confirmation how strong they were, and just Saturn alone, at bare minimum, is a respectable amount stronger than Kizaru. And Saturn is probably the weakest out of all of them, so just imagine 5 of them in one room. Now, what does all this mean, you may be asking? Well, I think for one, Sabo's portrayal is often misinterpreted by fans as yes, he is the Flame Emperor, but this does not come from strength alone. This has a lot to do with the moves him and Dragon are making with the Revolutionary Army. And yes, we know Sabo is very strong and has advanced levels of Haki, and is destined to take down figures in the world government later on, but let's relax on Sabo for the time being. Like, we don't even know if this guy's even awakened his fruit yet or has Conqueror's Haki. But anyways, my final verdict for Sabo is questionable still for now, but a lot less more questionable than I said before. Obviously, Sabo will still continue to grow stronger and be a top dog at the end of the series. And obviously, there's plenty of time before then, before One Piece ends, so he has plenty of time to grow. But that's all for Sabo. Next, we have Kizaru. Man, how do I even defend you right now? My worst take on my channel was saying that you were going to beat Luffy. Then I said it could be a super hard fight with it being a tie while you were holding back. But man, this is bad. You know, everything was looking like it was going to be alright for Kizaru. He wasn't really on the offensive and still took pretty much no damage from Luffy in Gear 5. And as well at the start of the fight, he cooked him out of Gear 4. Then we saw he didn't get any phase changes from the effects of Gear 5. Then we saw them both panting, showing there was some things going on off screen. And then the fight ends with Luffy using an upgraded version of the attack he used against Kaido. And both Luffy and Kizaru fell to the ground, seemingly ending the fight for now. So, I'm not here to make any excuses, so I'm saying my thoughts now. As of November 2023, Admiral Kizaru is probably the closest thing to a fraud as you can get. But hey, do not be surprised if we see a different Kizaru in the future. Now y'all know I couldn't make this list without including my guy Red Hair Shanks. And this one is pretty simple, so I'm not going to waste too much time on it. Basically, the new thing for calling Shanks a fraud is that he waited until his bigger enemies were defeated to then go for the One Piece. The reason this is so silly is that one, old Whitebeard was not in his way. When we see how that guy actually was at Marineford, in which we saw Whitebeard's face get obliterated by Kainu, only later on for Shanks to easily stop a bloodlusted Akainu's attack. And guess what else? During this same day, he ran into another Yonko, in which the most likely outcome is either Kaido went back and didn't want to fight Shanks, or they had an altercation in which Shanks was the victor, as there's no possible way he was going to let Kaido go into Marineford. And as for Big Mom, she is just blatantly weaker than Kaido. So clearly, Shanks has a reason for going for the One Piece now, and it has something to do with Luffy. But that's really all here. Shanks is clearly just that guy, bro. Oh yeah, before anyone brings up his crew, just know in any altercation Shanks has, he is the one to step up. And the only time this didn't happen was the first encounter with Kid, which he knew his crew could take care of pretty easily. Alright, next up we're going to talk about my guy Blackbeard, and Blackbeard is usually going to be on one side of this coin for most fans, and that is heads, he is in fact the strongest character in the verse, or tails, he doesn't even have feats to put him above people like even Luffy, Shanks, Mihawk, etc, etc. And if you were to ask me, I do think Blackbeard is the strongest, and the main two reasons come down to his devil fruits and of course end of series importance. Now when we're talking about a character like Blackbeard, I think where he gets this lower rep than he should is that he rarely ever fights that seriously, and it comes off even as reckless. And why would this be? Well, he just so happens to have two of the top 2 to 5 devil fruits, or whatever range you want to put them in, but regardless they are still 2 top tier fruits in the verse. One of which who was Whitebeard's old fruit, who was the strongest man at one time, and one that can literally nullify other devil fruit abilities. And those two things are really all you need to know. It's been confirmed he has ornament and observation haki as well, and I definitely bet on him having Conqueror's haki. Finally, the other reason is that he's just made out to be the endgame villain in the series, plain and simple. So for everyone's sakes, please put your stocks in Blackbeard. Now, my opinions have changed on where a couple of the admirals lie, though one has not changed, and that is Fleet Admiral Akainu. Now, the reason people tend to downplay Akainu is they misinterpreted the Marineford encounters he had, or they don't remember it quite as well as they think they do, as well as them saying he's afraid to move in on his own. So let's talk about it. So during Marineford, I see people always mention Whitebeard got the better of Akainu during Marineford, but this is blatantly just wrong. Now while yes, he did get a couple of good hits in, it pales in comparison to the damage Akainu inflicted onto him. And the second reason is so funny, and it goes to show a lot of these Akainu haters seem to not understand that a fleet admiral's job is to give orders and are decision makers for the Marines. And yes, he could go on his own, but why not send your capable top tier soldiers that are available to you at all times? So I don't know about y'all, but this criticism absolutely never made any sense to me. And my final statement here is he is just blatantly stated to have the strongest devil fruit in the verse. Now let's talk about Eustace Kid, whose last shown status was sinking to the bottom of the ocean, which was after he attempted to fight Shanks, and yeah, he got done pretty dirty. But does that make him a fraud? Most definitely not, but to most people he is, and honestly it stems from how insanely confident Kid is. And it really is almost to a point where it's delusional, especially coming off the high of taking down a Yonko alongside Law. But like, did anybody really think Kid was gonna beat Shanks? No, because we know Big Mom and Shanks are in a similar tier of power, but Shanks is just straight up above her without question, as well as him needing another member of the Supernova Big 3 Law on his side to defeat her. And yes, Kid got no diff by Shanks, but people ignore it's at least one of Shanks' strongest attacks. Let that have been someone else on Kid's tier of power and it would have been a bad day for his opponent. There's a reason Shanks took action when he did. Trust me, Kid will be a different monster when he returns. I'm gonna go ahead and group these last two in a duel once again, since this pretty much goes hand in hand. And that is that Mihawk's title is fraudulent and Zoro will inevitably become a fraud later on due to this. And this is just silly for so many reasons, and I'm not even going to go into it. I've made a video about this, plenty of others have as well. It's 2023, Mihawk is the strongest swordsman, so then Zoro will be. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I tried to be as reasonable as possible for each character I put on this list, as I really don't think there's more than 1 or 2 viable characters to be called a fraud. As 1, a lot of characters just haven't shown their true powers, if any at all. And 2, just let Oda cook. He's going to give these characters their time to shine, especially with the series ramping up so much right now. But with that being said, if you liked the video, like the video. If you didn't, don't. That's all for me. Peace.